All right, I think we are ready to get started and we hope people will be joining us. But first of all, a very, very good evening and welcome. Today we're talking about the Gita and the Mahabharata. These are stories that we have all heard since we were very young. But fascinatingly, they're still so relevant in today's time. Today, Sipping Thoughts is very excited to bring you this expert session on learnings from the Gita and the Mahabharata that are relevant for current times with Dr. Priya Virmani. Today, we will delve into the fascinating and insightful world of learning from our epics, learning that is especially relevant in the existential crisis that COVID has put us in. This journey with award winning international speaker Priya will be a rich exploration and a timely learning. She will help us look at concepts from the Gita and our epics like Jaya and Vijaya so that we can take this learning and apply it to become the best selves within the scenario and, of course, in the current crisis. In doing so, we will gain insightful learnings about human nature that come to the fore, which we can apply to get a better understanding both of ourselves and others. And also a definite way for better self management and better people management. Before we continue, I always love to tell you a little bit about Sipping Thoughts. So, Sipping Thoughts is a multi platform media company that was co founded by me, Sukirti, and Meeta Gudgutia. It was set up keeping in mind the tagline Real Women, Real Thoughts. We wanted to create a no judgment platform and create a network of women for women, and of course, men that have supported us. Sipping Thoughts is available on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, and of course, please do check out our website. A lot of very interesting content is there, and you can also find much more information about our webinars. And of course, the person you have been today waiting for. Although Priya does not need an introduction, I would love to introduce her so that you get a little bit better idea about our speaker for today. So, Dr. Priya, she's an author, a political and an economic analyst, a disruptive social entrepreneur, a TEDx speaker, and CEO of the luxury travel publication Ame-Luxe, a well being specialist, and a passionate advocate for women's issues. She is also the founder and director of Paint Our World, which is a humanitarian project that works to rehabilitate underprivileged children who have suffered trauma and abuse. She has won many awards. The first one, of course, that I will mention is the She Inspires Award in the UK in 2019, Promising Indian Award for Social Activism in India 2019, and Iconic Women Creating a Better World for All in 2017. These were all in recognition for her contribution to empowering women and children and for her political and economic talks and writing. Priya is a TEDx speaker and has given talks around the world. She has been invited to many conferences with leading thinkers and intellectuals such as His Holiness the Dalai Lama. As a political and economic analyst, Priya contributes to BBC Radio and writes for publications across the globe, including The Guardian and the New Statesman London. She contributes to politics and economic panels on TV channels, including NDTV and India Today. And today we're very excited to have Priya with us on Sipping Thoughts. So, a few do's and don'ts. Yes, everybody is on mute. It's just so that we do not get any background noise. But we would like the session to be as interactive as possible. So please do keep chatting with us, sending us your questions, sending us your thoughts. And also, if you have a question or would like to say something, please do raise your hand if you're familiar with the Zoom feature, or please do put it in the chat box. We would like to hear it from you, so we will be unmuting you. So with that, I'd love to get started and invite Priya. Priya, first of all, welcome to Sipping Thoughts. Very excited to have you here with us today. And first question, and I'm going to kick this off. So, what attracted you to the Gita?
Sukirti, before I begin, please allow me to thank you for hosting a platform like Sipping Thoughts that brings people like us together, and how beautifully has Sipping Thoughts played such a powerful role, even in the limitations that COVID has put us in. So thank you.
Thank
And
you
I
so much for those kind words.
Not at all. I'd also like to begin with an invocation. I'd like to invite each of you to come together in this space with me and Sukriti. If you want, you can close your eyes. If not, it's okay to have your eyes open. The idea is that we all, whatever we've been through in the day, each one of us has had a disparate day. We now come together in a common energy that connects me with each of you and each of us with the universe. So I will just read out this invocation. An invocation is a prayer that works internally within us to cleanse us and to connect us with the cosmic energy that radiates and pulsates in each one of us. So the invocation goes, take us from darkness to light, O universe, from untruth to truth, from scarcity to abundance, from transience to eternity. May peace reign within each of us and all around us. I give gratitude to Sukirti and each of you for joining me today and look forward to a session that will be insightful learning for each of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Priya. Now, coming back to my question, I think this is the one that's definitely on my mind. What drew you to the Gita and the Mahabharata?
So I was just about a 20-year-old studying in the UK, and I had this gorgeous, tall, almost 6 foot Scandinavian lady one day come up to me and said that, you know, you guys in India, you guys have like 3 million gods and goddesses, don't you? And I realized at that point that I didn't really understand my inheritance, my religion, my philosophy that I've inherited by being part of India, which is an ancient civilization, to be able to respond to her question adequately. So what I started doing is I started reading up, you know, in between my essay breaks, I would take books from Sanskrit scholars, and I would take books at Bristol University, where I was, had an amazing collection of books on Vedic philosophy, on Sanskrit, on Hinduism, on the Gita, on our epics. And I began reading up, and I was fascinated with all the repertoire of meaning and significance that I found. For example, a very simple thing, why do we wear a tika when we go into the temple? Now, this was something that I didn't fully appreciate, even though I did it all my life and all my growing years in India. But I learned with my exploration that the tika is a way to remind us when we do a puja, when we offer to divinity, or when we go into a consecrated space that is the temple, that the relationship we have with God is that of the soul and the supreme. Atma or Paramatma ka rishta hai. And Atma was known to reside here in the hypothalamus, where now science says human consciousness resides. And our Vedic philosophy, from which Hinduism comes, all those thousands of years ago had figured it out. So that was really how I got hooked onto Vedic philosophy. And then soon after that, I very tragically and prematurely lost my father. I was an only child at the time, and this happened very suddenly. It happened overnight. And that's when I turned to the Gita and I realized it's such a powerful text. It became my best friend and it remains my best friend. That's why I'm so passionate about it. And I want to infect as many people as possible with this passion. Let this virus, the virus of infecting you all for a love of knowing and getting to know the Gita better, far surpass any other virus we have around. And we know we have COVID around now. Let's make this even more famous and even more virulent a virus. So with that, I would like to... Kirti, I missed you there.
I said, let's get started. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So with that, I'd like to open up to all of you, and I'd like you all to participate on chat. And my opening question to everyone, I'd like to begin with a teaser, just a teaser about, you know, that link, the Gita and the Mahabharata. What do you think about the character Shakuni? If I asked you to describe Shakuni in a word or a phrase, please can you respond to me on chat and let me know what you think about Shakuni, the character from the Mahabharata, Shakuni? So I see a response there saying politician, another clever. Then one says strategic, smart, chatur, opportunist, schemer, devious, cunning, again clever. Thank you so much. Destructive, greed that resides in us, um, cunning, but at the same time smart. Have I missed any more popular as Shakuni Mama? Strategic, clever, vindictive. Now, I don't know if anyone would really want to have such an epitaph. Someone says here, idiot. That's interesting. Um, that we all have given Shakuni now in the matter of less than a minute. So let me here just shed a little bit of light on Shakuni, which will get us to reflect about how easily we can be judgmental about human nature, and will get us to be a little more attentive to the detail and backstories of people that so many of us often don't know about. So Shakuni too, let's just look for his interest rather than his sister's children. So Shakuni also has a backstory, and I'm going to take you back 5,000 years ago. This character, who we all have now, full of revenge, who we all now have established in less than a minute, and I've grown up knowing is all these adjectives: devious, opportunistic, clever, cunning. Um, I'm going to tell you a bit about him. So what happened is Gandhari, who marries uh, Dhritarashtra. If any of you, I'm going to digress just to say, if any of you have any questions at any point or I'm not very clear, please post it on chat. In case I miss it, Sukirti is going to be my angel helper today and bring it to my attention. So Gandhari gets married to Dhritarashtra, but before she gets married to Dhritarashtra of the Kuru household, Dhritarashtra, who is the father of the 100 Kauravas, who becomes the father of the 100 Kauravas, her Janampatri, or her astrological chart, is very, very inauspicious. So to remove that inauspicious bit, just like, Aishwarya Rai popularized this before she got married to Abhishek Bachchan, that she was Manglik. And so it is famously alleged that she got married to a peepal tree before she got married to Abhishek, to remove, the effect of the malignant planets in her horoscope. So similarly, Gandhari was married to a sheep. And after she was married to a sheep, the sheep was then killed off. So then she became technically a widow. And she then was available to remarry and marry somebody else. However, this aspect was not shared with the Kuru household when the matrimonial alliance, or the rishta, of Gandhari and Dhritarashtra was finalized. It's only post the wedding or after the wedding that Bhishma Pitama gets to know about this. When he gets to know about this, he is absolutely enraged and furious with Gandhari and with Dhritarashtra's in-laws that come from the kingdom of Gandhar, where Shakuni is the heir or the prince. So then that time there was this tradition where when a woman got married, a princess got married, after her marriage, her in-laws would invite her maternal family to the palace and be the most amazing hosts that they could be. They would take, उनकी खातिरदारी होती थी, जैसे हम कहते हैं. So Gandhar entire household, so Gandhari's father and all her brothers, were invited to the Kuru palace, to Hastinapur, by Bhishma Pitama. But Bhishma Pitama was seething with anger and with revenge that this lie, that it was a lie that Gandhari was, not a widow, and the way that the wedding alliance happened without this fact being revealed to him at the time, he was so furious about it that he decided to take revenge. He took revenge in an extremely cruel way. And often when you look at what really caused the war of the Mahabharata, sometimes you can go as far back as the way in which Bhishma Pitama chose to take revenge for what happened between the marital alliance of Gandhari and Dhritarashtra from the Gandhar household. So the father of Gandhari and her brothers are now in the palace in Hastinapur. And rather than being the best hosts possible, what Bhishma Pitama each day does is he decreases the amount of food he feeds them. Now, at that time, the rituals were such, the traditions were such that despite the fact that they were being so not only ill-treated, but so cruelly treated by their daughters-in-laws, they couldn't just get up and walk out of the palace and return. It would have been extremely offensive, and it would have let out a very, very bad, sense and reputation out into the entire sense of Bharatvarsh or India or the respective other kingdoms at that time. So the king of Gandhar, which was Gandhari's father, and her brothers, they withstood this cruelty. Each day as their food began decreasing, they all decided under the leadership of Gandhari's father that they are going to starve to death. Instead, they will all round up their portions of food, which were decreasing every day, and give that food to Shakuni. They would keep only Shakuni alive with the sole purpose of taking revenge for the cruelty that was meted out onto them. So then the king of Gandhar, one day when their death because of starvation was drawing near, he took a chain, and as his son Shakuni was walking, he whipped Shakuni on the ankle with that chain. And he told Shakuni, as Shakuni screamed in agony with the pain of that whip from that chain, he told Shakuni, this limp will never let you forget the mission in your life. You have been saved. You have been saved over the dead bodies of your father and all your brothers with only one life purpose: to be an obedient son, to be a faithful brother, and to carry out revenge for the cruelty that we faced by Bhishma Pitama in the palace of Hastinapur. So that's a very brief synopsis of a backstory that made Shakuni the devious and cunning man that we know him to be. Was he devious? Was he cunning? Or was he the most obedient, unfailingly faithful, unquestioning son that the Mahabharata has known? That is food for thought. And if you have any thoughts on that, please share with us in the chat. That was a teaser to get you hooked on. And now coming back to the actual concepts. So I would like to look at the concept. I'd like to begin by looking at a concept called Dhyana and darshan. But before I look at Dhyana and darshan, I would like to ask all of you, I'd like to open it up to each of you and say that what is the one thing about the Gita that you can think of, one thing that distinguishes it, that sets it apart from every other religious text that we know, whether it's Judaism, whether it's the Bible, whether it's the Quran, whether it's the Buddhist religious texts, whether it's Jainism. There is one aspect about the Gita. What do you think that might be? What is this aspect? There's Archana says a guide to life. Yes, of course, it is a guide to life. Practicality. Yes, all of this. Sukirti says set is war. Absolutely relevant to all our lives. This is a science of soul. Everyone can connect with it. Some very, very beautiful. You yourself are responsible for everything. Yes. Self-responsibility. Some very, very beautiful responses, but there is one response that really distinguishes it from every other text. The Gita is not a book of peacetime. It is a book that is dispensed a knowledge of philosophy, an entire navigation of human life and human nature that is dispensed in the midst, right in the middle of a raging battlefield, the greatest battle India had ever seen at that time. This is what sets it apart. So now I'm going to look at the concepts of Dhyana and darshan. To do this, I will take you back a little more into Buddhism. So in Buddhism, what do you see? The story of Buddhism is that Lord Buddha one day, overnight, decides to leave his wife, his sleeping child, his kingdom, of which he is heir, and he decides to abandon all of that, and he decides to seek answers in the embrace of the forest. So what he does in a forest is he sits down, he closes his eyes, and he goes within. That process of going within us is called Dhyana or meditation. From Dhyana, which originates from the entire philosophy of Buddhism, you have Lord Krishna introducing us to the concept of darshan. What is the concept of darshan? Lord Krishna does not give us a mandate for life, a manual to life, where he says we must retreat to the forests, where we must move away from where the strife and struggle in our life is. Rather, what Lord Krishna shows us is how we can be our best selves, how we can execute our moral responsibilities in life in the middle and midst of the struggle we might find ourselves in. Our struggles might be various, might be different. Right now, we're all connected by a common struggle, though, the existential crisis that COVID has unleashed on us. And Lord Krishna says, in the middle of this crisis, you are to run nowhere. Arjuna, it is in the middle of this crisis that you will find your answers. You will seek your answers, you will find your answers, and you will enable your growth, your inner growth that will contribute to all of humanity. Then what happens in the Gita? There is a point in the Gita where Arjuna, despite all of Lord Krishna's expositions and explications, is still distraught. And he says, Arjuna, that, great what you've said, but I still don't feel I have the ability to pick up my bow and arrow and fight my flesh and blood, people who are entwined to me from the time I was a little boy, people who are enmeshed in my emotions. What does Lord Krishna do then? That's when Lord Krishna assumes his Vishwaswarup, or his entire energetic form, which is so emblematic of the entire cosmic energy that he represents. What does he ask Arjuna to do then? He asks Arjuna to open his eyes and do darshan. Darshan means open your eyes. Open your eyes to the struggle. Look in the without. By looking in the without, you will find your way to seek within. That is the fundamental aspect of the concept of Dhyana and darshan. If any of you have any questions, please put them. But if you delve a little more into what Dhyana and darshan mean, they become so relevant for our times. Darshan is what life around us right now is asking us to do. We're in the midst of COVID. Each of us is facing our own challenge as a result of it. Some acute, some not so acute. Could be personal, could be professional, it could be both, it could be mental, emotional. And yet in this struggle, the Gita shows us how there is light. It says right here, there is light. You need to go nowhere, Arjuna. Right here, You will find your purpose. You will find your contribution. You will find your growth to being and becoming your best self. With this sharing, I would again like to open up. Thank you so much, Pooja, for that wonderful comment. Great to have your feedback. I'd like to open up to everyone again with another question. And my question is, if there is one thing in the Gita, just one thing, both in the Gita and the Mahabharata, so it should be a common thing that is present in both, and it could be an abstract emotion or a common thing that is present in both the Gita and the Mahabharata that resonates most with you, or you think is the most resonant takeaway of both these beautifully enriching philosophical texts. Sunil Ravla says, purpose of life on planet Earth is self-realization and actualization. Absolutely. Willpower. Do your karma because only that is in your hands and you're doing. Yes. Revenge on negative side, justice on positive, doing one's duty, karma. I'm reading your responses as they're coming in. The way you've narrated makes it more worth it. Thank you, Achla. Thank you so much. Thank you, Shilpi. Great to see you here. Dharma. Absolutely. But there is one very simple word. It's a very simple word, but it's an abstract emotion that is really, really hard to pin down, really, really hard to touch and feel and sense and know. And yet it's something that is, Shami says, never give up. That is most powerful and that is most enabling in life. And that is the one quality that you see, or the one aspect that you see that connects both the Mahabharata and the Gita. And for this, I really need another entire session at least to do it justice. But I will at least give you some food for thought and begin the inner conversation in each of us on this, is grace. Throughout the Mahabharata, the war is enabled and won. The victory happens only because of that one aspect, which is grace, his grace. And to look a little more at his grace, I often do workshops with children, and children come up to me and say, oh, I prayed to God for my exam, but I still didn't do so well, or I don't believe in God, or what is God, or how do I understand God's grace, or how do I understand divinity? And I'm talking about children who are often under 10 years old. How do you then put forth the concept of something that is beautifully powerful, not necessarily, that is a higher intelligence, but one that connects with us, one that weaves us all in. It's like a needle where the thread goes in and then attaches each of us to it, And I would like to share this one story that I share with the children that is applicable to all of us. Thank you, Rakesh. I hear you saying surrender. I'm trying to multitask between the comments and this. I'm trying to do my best. In case I miss a comment, please do forgive me. Is this the grace of Krishna consciousness? So Ankit, I'll just speak about this story that I share with the children. Maybe some of you have come across it and are aware about it. So this is not necessarily a true story. It didn't necessarily actually happen. Part of it has happened, possibly not all of it, but it is a story that brings forth what grace that is so abstract, so hard to really touch or feel or sense or know, but yet is so real and so palpable. And it's a sensibility within each of us, if only we choose to connect with it and then actualize it. So this is when Draupadi, the common wife of the 5 Pandavas, before she became the common wife, the daughter of King Drupad, when she had her Swayamvar. A Swayamvar is, where all the eligible princes of the time were invited to vie for the hand, to compete for the hand of this princess. And Draupadi was known to be the most beautiful. She's described in the Mahabharata as the most beautiful and the most fiery and feisty women of her times. And she was therefore, her Swayamvar was extremely, extremely popular. And also because she was the daughter of King Drupad, a very powerful and strategic king of his time. So all the kingdoms and all the princes and households wanted to connect with King Drupad and the kingdom, besides winning this beautiful princess's hand in marriage. At that time, the Pandavas were actually in exile. However, for this story, the Pandavas meet with Lord Krishna before they decide to go for Draupadi's Swayamvar. When they meet with Lord Krishna sits Arjuna down. Arjuna is like, his best friend. Imagine a chat with your best friend. He sits Arjuna down and he tells Arjuna what the task will be. That this is going to be a task, a test of utmost skill, utmost talent, utmost attention, focus, that even Arjuna, who is renowned and celebrated for his focus, even he has to nevertheless be extremely meticulous about his focus. So Lord Krishna sits him down and lectures him and tells him that there's going to be a rotating fish in the ceiling. That fish will be reflected in a pool of water. You have to, the suitor, in this case Arjuna, will have to look at the reflection of the rotating fish on the ceiling, in the water. Looking at the reflection, he has to be able to nail the eye of that fish. No other part of the fish, and the fish is constantly moving and rotating. He gives Arjuna a long, comprehensive lecture of the do's and don'ts, etc. At the end of it, Arjuna is really, really aggravated and peeved at Lord Krishna. And he says, I am known to be one of the best archers or the dhanudhars of my time, one of the most glorious warriors, and you're sitting me down and giving me this like I'm a schoolboy kind of lecture. And anyways, if anyway I have to do the entire job, what's your role? What are you lecturing me about when anyways it's all stuff that I have to do? And there, Lord Krishna pauses. You know how Krishna is known for his characteristic smile, his leela, his sense of instantly seeing beyond the mask and knowing, the Maya and the leela of Maya. He looks at Arjuna and he smiles, his Lord Krishna smile. And he tells Arjuna, my job is to keep the water still. Arjuna had not even thought that the movement of that water, which was not in the hands of even the most skillful warrior that God could give birth to on the planet, is not in his hands. That's the grace of the Lord. That's where grace comes in. That water stillness can only come with grace. So this story, I hope you can take to seep within you, and I hope you can circulate it to your children, most especially, to your family, to your friends, and to whenever you are in doubt that there is something beyond you that cares for you, that loves you, that nourishes you, that nurtures you, that keeps you. Know this at all times. It's the most powerful learning that without his grace, really, even a leaf's movement is something that won't happen. To know that trees exhale exactly that amount of carbon dioxide that enables breath in us, exhale oxygen, sorry, that enables breath in us, and we exhale the carbon dioxide that is a waste for us, but is air for trees, to see how the cosmos works, that the sun is precisely the right distance from Earth, a millimeter here and there, and we could either be scorched or otherwise, that enables life. There must be someone out there who is managing this entire sort of, cosmos. I wonder if that someone has a double MBA from Harvard or Wharton. I really, really wonder. That's grace. Grace that makes sure that when you have a bread, it becomes you. And when your best friend has a cookie, it becomes your best friend. That same cookie, no matter who has it, it becomes that person. That makes sure that when a newborn is born, without any instruction to the child, you take the child on the mother's breast and the child instantly suckles. There is a certain DNA of grace that works in each one of our engineering. I see the human form as a pristine, the highest form of engineering that our Creator has really come up with. So let's all be conscious of this grace and connect with this grace. At this point, I would like to pause. I have looked at two very powerful concepts. I would like to pause and open up to you if you have any questions. Please let me know in the chat any thoughts. So Kirti, is there anything there that has come in that I may have missed at all?
No, I think you've covered it all. So,
any thoughts, any questions any one of you have? Are you going to keep grace close? I hope you're going to take the story of grace.
So Rakhi Singhal is asking, what do you mean by the stillness of water? And please explain super consciousness is coming from Vikas.
Okay. How do I explain the stillness of water? Here, the stillness of water in this story is a metaphor. The story is just one to elucidate what the concept of grace really means. It very beautifully shows that Arjuna, who was renowned for being the best of his time, but even the best, with the best ability, the best training, the best competence, will not make it if the water is not still. Now, the water being still could be different for different people. You could be praying for a loved one, and you might need the stillness of grace and recovery there. It could be also that stillness comes not necessarily in the recovery of the person, but in the acceptance in you, the grace in you. Let grace flow in you in such a way that life itself becomes a journey that is graceful. This is what Krishna was humbling Arjuna with. Arjuna, who thought that it's all him and only him in his response to Krishna, Krishna immediately reminded him that he was now getting so arrogant and overconfident of his abilities and getting so irritated and aggravated at Lord Krishna for giving him this kind of sermon and do's and don'ts. But actually, he had to take into account that he was vulnerable. But when we accept our vulnerability, each of us now is so vulnerable with COVID around. We are vulnerable anyways, even without COVID. But COVID has brought this vulnerability to the fore. It's brought us in touch with our vulnerability. It's made this vulnerability real and immediate. And, each of us has to wear a mask. Each of us has to wear gloves. We can't interact with each other as we were interacting. One virus has really got us all locked in. But as we recognize our vulnerability, that's when we are able to work with it and surpass it to understand human resilience. Vulnerability and resilience go hand in hand. And resilience comes when you understand grace. Grace not as being separate to you, but grace as being part of you. If Arjuna was able to win that Swayamvara and win Draupadi's hand, and the water was kept still. That grace became part of him. The Pandavas won the war of the Mahabharata because Krishna's grace was with them. The only difference between the two armies, there are many stories about grace in the Mahabharata, many stories. If I gave 1 hour every day for a year just on grace from the Gita and the Mahabharata, it still wouldn't explore it fully. But the fundamental aspect is knowing that we are a part of that grace. So that grace becomes part of Arjuna's repertoire and the water achieves its stillness. Please know, in your vulnerability, in your acceptance of it, in your humility with it, there is surpassing it to resilience. And that's where grace becomes alive in the process from vulnerability to resilience. No better time to test this than right now with COVID, where we are right here, right now. Yes, Sukirti.
So there's a question. Would you equate, and this is coming from Nilakshi, would you equate grace with dignity?
Absolutely, Grace. Thank you, Anamika, for that. Thank you so much for all your love and encouragement. Grace absolutely embraces and includes, is inclusive of dignity, but it goes beyond dignity. Would you associate Lord Krishna as being a dignified person? Somehow it doesn't fit. He's more than dignified because it's a dignity that comes with a humble knowing, and in humility there is strength. The Gita says, be humble, not because you are doing humanity a favor. When somebody says to me, for example, oh Priya, you are humble, if I take it as, oh my God, they're sort of giving me a compliment, I'm such a good human being. No, humility is for yourself. When you are humble, the vicissitudes of life, the ups and downs, which are inevitable, even Lord Krishna had to face the vicissitudes. Jesus Christ had to face life's ups and downs. Lord Rama had so many struggles and vagaries, so that when even the prophets and gods themselves are not spared, we are mere mortals. So that is a constant, the ups and downs. But grace, when that also becomes a constant, the way we are able to navigate the ups and downs, our entire sense of that experience changes and shifts completely. Play with it, try it, explore it for yourselves. Thank you, Mayank.
Yeah, so there's a question that's come from Sarbani, which is extremely relevant. How do we explain grace to somebody who is maybe residing on the footpath?
So the fact that this is somebody residing on the footpath is a very it's a very difficult soul searching question. But there where grace comes in is we have to understand that there are so many stories from the Gita and Mahabharata. I realize we have only 15 minutes to go that I'm so tempted to share with you that elaborate how, and there's one with Brahma and Shiva, which is extremely powerful. Do we have time, Sukirti? Can I mention the story?
We have 15 minutes. So yes.
So the best way that I can look at this is I'm going to start with a story. There's a story of Lord Brahma and Shiva. So what happens is Lord Brahma has created the cosmos and the world. He's created all of us. And he is really delighted with his creation. He's sitting in total bliss on his lotus and he's chilled out. Lord Shiva comes along and Lord Shiva surveys Brahma's creation. He surveys Brahma's creation on the planet and he sees there is greed, he sees there is lust, he sees there is suffering, there is anger, there is starvation, there is abuse, there is violence. At the same time, there is also celebration, there is also festivity, there is also love, there is also positivity, there is also help. But Shiva sees there are more pockets of the negative than the positive. Shiva sees that there are places of distress and agony and acute suffering and acute injustice. Shiva is enraged. He is absolutely beside himself with fury. He can't contain his fury, and in that stage of absolute rage, you've seen how Shiva is. I mean, his hair is like a jata, and he's this very unkempt kind of. There are various sides of Shiva. Again, Shiva is also called Sundaram because he changes his form when he goes to ask for Parvati's hand. He goes to Parvati's parents the second time because the first time he's rejected. So this is the not Sundaram part of Shiva that I'm talking about, but the very rough, unkempt, disheveled aspect of Shiva. So Shiva is like that, and he goes to Brahma in that state where physically he looks like an absolute storm in form, and then his mentally as well, he's beside himself with anger. He goes to Brahma and he says, on what basis are you sitting glorifying your own creation? Have you seen how desperate and how much in pain most of your creation is? And Brahma says, I have not written their lives. What I have done is I have created the pristine magic and miracle of the human prana or life form, and I have given them a soul and atma. I have given them consciousness of the mind for them to make their decisions. He sits down, I don't have time, I'm going to be brief here. He sits down and he explains to Shiva the rationale behind his creation, the method behind his madness of creation. Shiva gradually starts listening to Brahma and gets more and more hooked and drawn to Brahma's entire explanation of what human beings and human life and creation is all about. As he begins listening, Shiva's sense of total rage at Brahma starts quietening, and from a space of being quiet, it turns to jubilation and joy and celebration of what Brahma has created. He becomes in awe of Brahma, that Brahma has actually been able to actualize and realize this so complex creation in his brain. He's able to manifest it with his force and his energy into what we know as the Brahman or the world. That's why it's called Brahman, or the world or the universe created by Brahma's creative energy. And Shiva then becomes so elated. So he goes from the extreme, but like a seesaw, from one end of being absolute in complete anger and fury like a hurricane, rage like, and then he goes into absolute jubilation. When Shiva is in absolute jubilation, that's when he does the Tandav, and we know the Nataraj form of Lord Shiva, because he dances in celebration of creation that Brahma has made. And therefore, I would like to respond to you, Stravani, to say that each of us, I said that when I was speaking about grace, has this grace, is connected to this grace. And therefore, it's how we have used that grace to connect to each other. How have we used the grace to create such injustice, to create such disparity that there is a street dweller there? If we allow ourselves to connect with that grace and actualize it, each person does, a human chain is going to be created. And that person on the road is definitely at some point going to have grace reach him through us. We become the tools, we become the vehicles, we become the medium. Doesn't it happen so often in life? It happens with me that I'm a little desolate, or I need help in a certain aspect and I don't know where to go, and someone appears, or the right person comes to me without much thinking. And then I say that God reaches us through people so often, his energy and his grace. Let's actualize that. Let's realize that we are vehicles. We are his medium. We are his tools. Grace, how does grace become known? How do you know that grace exists? Grace exists by how you and I choose to connect with it and live with it. We have stories about grace, but how do we bring grace to life? We can only bring grace to life by actually being grace and living with grace. That's it. Each of us is a lodestar. Each of us is, walking, talking evidence of grace or otherwise, depending on how we choose.
So Vikas has a question and he's asked it another time. He would like to explain the super consciousness in terms of our existence and why should we surrender to the Almighty?
Wonderful. People, Anamika, thank you. People come in our life through grace alone. Absolutely. I mean, there is so much where our physiology or psychology to understand everything ends. That's when I feel our faith in grace becomes strongest. And faith is shown to even change the chemical balance of our brain. Positive chemicals increase in our brain. So whether actually another force called God or a higher intelligence or universe or anyone else comes to our rescue or not, we within us, within our minds, within our bodies, within our souls, become much more powerful to be able to deal with that situation or that life event. What else? What else is power? What else is grace? What else if our life journey itself can be transformed to positivity, irrespective of what's happening around us? That's not in our control. But coming back to, thank you, Rakesh, for saying that. Thank you so much. We can bring grace in our life by becoming instrument, channel, medium in the hands of Lord Almighty. We need to find our axis and orbit. Absolutely, Sunil. And life is really, as we begin finding that process, you will realize that finding the process, it comes together with becoming your best self. As you find, you become more and more, you get closer and closer to your best self. So coming back to the super consciousness, sorry, Niharika,
Yeah,
great.
he sent it to me personally, so that's why I'm asking that question. So you may not see it in the chat.
Okay. Sukirti, can you just reiterate it for me once and repeat it?
Sure. He says, could you please explain the super consciousness in terms of our existence and why we should surrender to the Almighty? And another question that's coming from Burnil. Does darshan lead to dhyana or vice versa?
Okay. Let me take the first question first. So about consciousness and super consciousness. So let's make it very simple. Let's go back to the alphabets. If you get the alphabets right, you get the phonetics right, we can make any words we want. So we are consciousness. If we are the Atma, all we say is that is Param Atma. So that is the parent, the ultimate energy form from which all other forms of energies come. Now, remember I told you as I opened, I shared the Sukirti asked me how I got connected to the Gita and what was my hook. So the very first question I went to find is, why do we have 3 million gods and goddesses? Which I still have that gorgeous blonde Scandinavian lady, it's as though she's right in front of me asking me that question. And the answer, that was the first question I found, I had, and the answer was that in our Vedic philosophy and Hinduism, we do not have many gods and goddesses. We do not. It is not a multiplicity of gods and goddesses, but a multiformity of that same energy form in various ways. So it's that same energy of the super consciousness that then takes the consciousness of the star, the consciousness of the seas, the consciousness of plants, of mountains, of human beings, of animals, of viruses, of bacteria. Everything has some sense of a consciousness, right? We have everything in science has been shown. I can break down my phone. I can break down a piece of paper. I can break down, my watch into proton, neutron, electron. I can break down every cell in the human body. Everything I can break down: proton, neutron, electron. 3 things. And we equate that in Vedic philosophy to creation, destruction, preservation. 3 things. Everything boils down to 3. And these 3 things, are we able to manage creation, preservation, destruction? Not really. There is one energy source. It's like having, a plug point here, right? And then on that plug point, if we have 5 friends together in the room, all 5 of us can, one after the other, go and charge our phones. That plug point is the super consciousness. And all our phones are the consciousness. I've said it in a very simple anecdotal way, but without the plug point, where will your phones keep getting their recharge from? That's a question that gives you food for thought.
So, Priya, we are running out of time. So, just one last question. I know we had talked about for COVID times. So, what is that one thing, if we could think about for COVID times, that we can take away? I know you've said grace, but as we are closing and we are talking about the Gita and the Mahabharata, how can they give us the strength in these times?
Before that, would you like me to look at the Dhyana and darshan, which somebody asked about?
Yes, you could do that too.
So with Dhyana and darshan, the way that our lives are now structured, we really are in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, of the Mahabharata, which means we are not all living in either monasteries or ashrams or in forests. We are in the midst of our households, in the midst of our lives, in the midst of, the different roles and identities and demands on us, and the different mother, daughter, father, brother, lover, etc. roles that we are playing. So that is our battlefield of Kurukshetra. So for us, it is most relevant to begin with darshan, to understand that within this space, I can still find my meaning, my growth, and my contribution. I don't need to divorce this space. I don't need to run away from it. I can find my growth, and then to use that energy to go within and to get the within as strong and as connected as possible. That's the whole concept of darshan. Darshan is about facing your challenges as you are, where you are, right here, right now. What Buddha did is he didn't do a right here, right now in the palace. He left the palace, he went into the forest, and he said, no, I have to divorce myself completely from the outside world. We can do that. It works brilliantly. It works beautifully if we have that option. How many of us really have the option? We're householders. Can we really forsake our families overnight and go into the forest? If we can, if you have chosen the path, as many people do in their lives, great. But most of us, the majority of us, we are in household situations. So we move from darshan to dhyana. That is applicable to the context that we find ourselves in. And Sukirti, you said, what is the learning that we take for COVID? So the learning that I would say is understanding the very concept, as I said, that when we take into account our vulnerability, and COVID has shown that to us so powerfully that no other situation, incident, world event in my lifetime has ever done on such a global scale. To take that and to not get weak by it, but to get empowered by it, because to understand that when we surpass vulnerability, we come to the space of grace. And grace is what enables the process or the movement from, just like you move from a child to an adolescent to an adult, similarly, you move with vulnerability and from vulnerability to a space of resilience. That's what we're finding, right? We're finding we are very resilient as human beings as well. We're finding ways. Right now, we're resilient, and so we are on Zoom. We haven't taken no for an answer, that even though we're indoors, we're finding ways to do things. We're finding ways, but I'm talking about finding ways to do things within you, to feel good within you, to feel empowered within you, to become your best self from within you. That's one aspect that I have personally been finding very, very powerful from the Gita. It's an everyday process. There is a part in the Gita where Lord Brahma talks about surrendering to Krishna or to the super consciousness. Understand surrender and practice it. What does surrender do? Does surrender mean tomorrow you will not get COVID at all? No. But surrender means that the process of life will become lighter. When the process of life becomes lighter because you have outsourced your heaviness to a super consciousness or to this entity that you have faith in, when you become lighter, like a balloon with lightness, it rises. That's when you are able to rise to your divine self, to be your best self. So connect connect with the charge point that charges all your mobiles. Connect with the charge point that charges all of us. Let's understand that there is a greater energy there. That's how the stars are in motion. Otherwise, if I ask anybody, please explain a very simple thing to me. In the morning when you have, toast and a banana, and I have toast and a banana, how does the toast and banana become Priya? And how does the toast and banana become Sukirti? Science can't really explain it. We have chemicals in our brain. How do those chemicals then become the feelings of sadness and happiness and grief and resentment? There is a mystery. And in that mystery, there is grace. We are that mystery. We are a living form, a sentient, conscious form of that mystery. It's a powerful mystery. Let's connect with it. Let's celebrate it. Let's be it. In good times, as much as in testing times.
Well, thank you, Priya. That was an amazing, amazing session. I know what you said, we could spend years on this. So hopefully this has given you a bit of a glimpse, and we thank you all for joining us. And we will try to have Priya back so that she can give us some more wisdom. With that, I wish you all a very, very good night.
Thank you, Anjana, as well. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Sukirti, for this. And I just want to give gratitude to every single person who has joined today, and to Sukirti and Sipping